Okay, so I wanted to talk about the most important realization that I have made in my entire music career, education process. I wish I had learned this first, but it just happened to be one of the last that I came to realize. And that is that the energy that we emote when we are performing, rehearsing, recording, etc., goes into the music. All right. When you talk about the famous vibe of a song, it's more than a theoretical construct. It is the primary reality of what makes one piece of music a hit and so many others a miss. And that is the energy, the frequency, and the vibration. And it took me so long to realize that because I started with making sure that I was on time. Rhythm is important, of course. Making sure that I was in pitch, that is very much important, and that I knew the lyrics, that I was singing the right words, and I would get anxious and worry, when I'm singing a complicated song, whether I was going to screw up and sing the right words or not. And what really was important, what I found later, is that it's just the energy that you emit. And one of the first really big clues that I got to this was when I hadn't, I recorded a bunch of songs and I didn't listen to them for many years. Went back and listened to them, and it was like a new song. I had forgotten a lot of what I was thinking and feeling when I created these songs. And so listening to them new, I noticed that during this bridge section that was complicated and challenging, and I recorded it when I just wrote the song. I didn't rehearse it for a month and then record it. So I didn't really know it. I was just kind of winging it and writing it as I went. Well, I could feel myself tense up and get anxious when that section came up. And I felt like a deja vu. It's like, oh my God, that is exactly how I felt as I approached that section because I didn't have it down. But there's another thing. It just kind of came out of me. And that's another thing that I've learned is that a lot of what I thought was originating from me was being transmitted to or through me. That's another entirely different conversation this is very enlightening. But to focus on this subject, I realized that somehow my emotional state was getting mixed in the vibration of my music and being transmitted and being recorded. And it didn't make a complete connection until I was watching a lecture by Dr. Jerry Tennant. He focuses on the bioelectric, the electrical field and network of human biology. Very fascinating. If you haven't heard his work and his theories and his um, research, you really got to listen to that guy because nobody else is talking about the things that he's talking about. Um, he was saying that the emotions are stored in our electromagnetic field, which is generated by the heart. All right. And that makes sense Because when you are recording a bass, for example, you are recording the vibration, the energy of its electromagnetic field. And the field that we emanate has been documented on the average to extend 6 feet from us. And that is one explanation of how you can feel other people's energy. When someone's in a really bad mood and you're standing in their field, you can feel their energy, you can feel their vibe. Someone who's carrying a big burden with them, let's say they've lost somebody that they love, you can feel that shit. It gets transmitted through the ether. That's another subject. But to focus on this, when you're playing a guitar, you have an electromagnetic pickup that's right next to your gut, that's well within your electromagnetic field. From everything that vibrates, which is pretty much everything, a torus pattern emanates from the center of that being and creates an electromagnetic field. Some call it an aura. But you can document it, you can meter it, you can record it, you can visualize it with infrared photography. But for some reason, they still try to make you believe that it doesn't exist. It's silly. But, so what I'm saying is when you're playing a song, if you're worried about screwing up, if you're wondering, oh my God, am I going to pull this off? You get nervous and like, oh shit. That's going to be transmitted, all right? And people are going to feel that, and it's not going to feel good. Doesn't matter if you play all the notes perfectly in pitch and on time. If your vibe is off, nobody's gonna feel it. Nobody's gonna love it. You know what I'm saying? Music is like a drug, and if you compare it to pharmaceutical products, it's far more effective. You can crank up James Brown, I Feel Good, and a room full of people will immediately start to feel good. They'll start tapping their feet, and by the end of it, they're going to be dancing around. It's crazy. But that's the feeling, that's the vibe, and James was a master alchemist with energy. Most of these people in these bands that have had the success where people know who you're talking about, they understand energy, frequency, and vibration, and how to create formulas, potions. We choose our music based on how we want to feel, all right? When you crank up Ted Nugent, Wango Tango, you're going to feel a certain way, all right? And if you want to be mellow, you're in the wrong place, baby. He simply refuses to play mellow shit, man. You want to chill out, fire one up, and contemplate the complexities of the universe. You crank up Pink Floyd's, Dark Side of the Moon. If you want to really get grounded and in touch with the spiritual side, you crank up some Gregorian chant. It's going to make you feel a certain way. You want to, bang your head when you crank up some heavy metal or some death metal, and you find yourself running around in circles around a bonfire, slamming into people. And, it sounds like I'm joking, but I've done experiments with the power of the frequency of all these different types of music. Years ago, I was working as a music director for a place called Vista Del Mar. It's a center for special needs kids. And one uh, section of their population, they have a school for autistic kids. And I was working with the residential program, and all of a sudden they wanted to bring um, these kids into my program. And I really didn't understand as much about this as I really needed to or was comfortable with. So I started researching as much as I could, and I started doing some, I don't want to say experiments because that has a negative connotation in some uh, perceptions, but I was working with a room of children that most didn't have the capability to express themselves, communicate, and talk. They couldn't use language. And they could be triggered by certain things that would cause, unhealthy reactions, and stimming, and self-injurious behavior. And so it was like tap dancing in a minefield. You have to know really what the triggers are, what you're working with, and how to. It's hard to even explain, but how to navigate. And so early on, what I did was I set up, had a 6 CD turntable, and I put totally different types of music in each one of these. I ended up making a mix CD of all the different styles, completely in contrast, one after the other. I would start with Gregorian chant, and then I would play death metal, and then I would play James Brown, I Feel Good, and this is some disco, and then I would play a Beatles song, and then I would go to a classical, like a Beethoven, or then a Chopin. And I would sit back and I would watch how these kids perceived the energy and the frequency because they didn't understand the words, or if they could, they couldn't express that they understood the words. And so I realized instantly that they understood the message of the energy and the frequency of the music. I would play Gregorian chant, and they would just chill out, and they would just lie on their backs on the floor and just stare at the ceiling. As a group, they would do this. And, you know, 80% of them were laying on the floor, and there were just a couple that were still standing by the end of this piece. And then it goes into death metal. And so, surge of energy. They get up to their feet, and they start going around in circles. I kid you not. The adults do that at the concerts too. But to see the carnal, natural reaction um, was enlightening. And then you put on a disco song or a James Brown song, and they got happy. They all got happy. And you put on a sad song, and they got sad. The emotion got through regardless. What happens when you crank up a song like James Brown, I Feel Good, is it will change your vibration through what's called sympathetic vibration. For example, I could play this bass. You can't really hear it, but all of the guitars that are in the room will start to resonate at that frequency. And you can put a mic up to it, and you can see wirelessly, remotely, that everything is being modulated to that frequency. And the strongest frequency wins. You know what I'm saying? And so people will choose their music like they choose a drug if they want to feel relaxed and de-stress. they'll choose something mellow, and it will make them feel that way. It will overpower their frequency through sympathetic vibration and change the way they feel. And that's a powerful thing to know. If you're feeling bad and depressed and considering doing things that are not in your best interest or others, you know, think of how you want to feel. If you want to feel happy, then crank up some James Brown or whatever, whatever choice works for you. But, that's as solid as aspirin right there. And anyway, back to my original point. The most important thing is the energy, the frequency, and the vibration, the mojo that you emit. And you have to be conscious and think, when you pick up that guitar. I mean, most of the times I pick up guitars for therapy anyway. It's to change my vibe, it's to feel a certain way. But if you're going to be performing for somebody or recording something, you want to be conscious of how you feel. And if it's not the way that you want to feel, that should be used for that song. For example, if you're writing a song about somebody you love that died, and you're in a really happy, funny, goofy, sarcastic mood, you're going to change the whole tone of that song. And that might be good. That might be what you're going for. Um, but it could be seen as disrespectful. So you want to align your frequencies with your your music. And there's really a lot more that can be said about that, but I'm gonna I'm gonna leave it there for now anyway. I hope that helps somebody. Cheers.